All right, so everybody, welcome to the Big Ideas in App Architecture podcast. Today, I am talking to Masaru Hoshi, who is a cloud architect working at Qlik, the company that does data differently. So, Masaru, tell us a little bit about yourself and what do you do at Qlik?
Yeah, no, thanks for having me here, David. We've been trying to make this happen for a while. I think,
In a while.
yeah, I think time has not been helping us. So yeah, thank you for having me. So yeah, about myself. I'm a half Japanese, half Brazilian guy. I live in Canada. I've been in Canada for 16 years. I'm a cloud architect at Qlik. I've been at Qlik for 8 years already. So yeah, I really it was something that I never thought I would work in a company like that. So spoilers, I was always terrible with SQL and data and always cursed this stuff and say like, no, I'm going to work with data my whole life, and here I am. Yeah.
Very cool. This is awesome. I wanted to ask you, your background right now that I'm seeing, is that a real background? Because, or it's like, or is it like a photo of a real place that you used to work at?
Yeah, so a lot of old computers here. There's this place here in Ottawa. It's called the Defense Bunker.
Mm-hmm.
It's during the 60s, the whole Cold War and stuff. Like the Prime Minister of Canada, like Diefenbaker, he decided to build this bunker to
Mm.
I don't know, to help support the government if a nuclear war hits up. And it's a really amazing place. It's a 4 stories bunker. You can walk around out. Now it's a museum, but it's fully prepared to support like up to 30 days of
Got it.
sustainable life. Computers, like medical rooms, like dining halls, etc. It's impressive. If you have a chance, come to Ottawa, go visit this place. It's really
Got it.
nice.
Oh, that's awesome. So, once again, I just want to thank you. I know we were trying to get this going and then finally you're here. When I was preparing, I was thinking about different themes. And so obviously, for everyone listening in, Masaru is also like a karate teacher, right? And we can talk about that a little bit later too. But you follow your third belt, black belt in karate, and
Yeah,
uh, and then you follow kobudo. Like, can you expand that a little bit?
yeah. I actually have I have my third degree black belt in 2 arts at Okinawa Kobudo. So if you know,
Okinawa kobudo.
yeah,
Yes.
it's a traditional Okinawan martial arts. It you if you know the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, like they have those sticks,
Yeah.
side daggers, nunchaku. We do all of that with the exception of the katana. So katana is not part of the art, but yeah,
Got it.
and we have a
That's
couple more. Yeah.
No, that's awesome. So yeah, so thank you so much for answering that, because what I was thinking was, it was you have such an interesting background. So I was thinking about themes, right? So I thought we'll either call this episode Data, Dojos, and Digital Transformation, or we'll call it Code, Cloud, and Karate. But yeah, once again, thank you so much. So for people listening, to this episode, and if you're listening and who do not know anything about Qlik, and you've worked at Qlik for about 8 years, tell us a little bit about Qlik, and what does the company do, really, and your role as a cloud architect. Like, what do you do? What kind of products are you working with?
Sure. So Qlik is originally like a Swedish company. It started like back in the 80s, like with desktop solutions. And
Got
now we are a full cloud company now. And Qlik's focus is on data. So Qlik is the leader in the two Gartner quadrants for several years. We're leader in data integration, data analytics, and we've been investing heavily on AI driven insights. Basically, the focus of the company is emphasizing an end to end data solution and doing things like integrating real time data pipelines, advanced AI and machine learning capabilities,
Nice.
and of course, like trying to make trying to make organizations be truly data driven. Like
Right.
one thing that we talk about a lot in the company is we as an engineers, our strongest weapon is actually the numbers. So we
Mm.
have to be using data in our favor so we can prove what's going on, what we're doing, and use KPIs to monitor everything that we're doing. So yeah.
That's awesome. When you were growing up, did you ever imagine yourself being a cloud architect? Like, what was it growing up? You always wanted to be in tech. Is that how it was?
Okay. I didn't, I never thought about working in tech when I was young. I wanted to be a volleyball player.
Nice.
And then I thought about being a musician,
Yeah.
and history teacher. None of them happened. So I'm just working IT.
Well, that's brilliant. Well, I'm glad that you're working as a cloud architect here at Qlik. One of the products that I know from Qlik is called Qlik Replicate, and it's the reason I know about it helps with like data migration. Like, so we are a company. We Cockroach Labs is the company behind Cockroach DB, resilient, scalable, distributed database. You can do anything that you do with the Postgres database, but with the scale, millions of transactions, reads and writes. So the interesting thing is we've had episodes or like discussions with customers who are like running on mainframe, and they're running on like db2 instances, and they're like, well, we want to get out of that, and what is one of the ways we can figure out a data migration data pipeline? And that's when Qlik Replicate is a solution that came up. So that was my kind of a little bit of what I know about the company. I've never personally used the product, but I've always heard from people that it's brilliant. So thank you so much for working at that company and doing so cool, amazing things. All right, so let's transition a little bit to talking about a little bit about your journey, right? So you transitioned from, you're a developer, you did some work on infrastructure, and now cloud architecture. What inspired that shift, like moving from doing core engineering or core dev to like infra and cloud? Like, what was happening at the time when you made that shift?
Man, I'm going to try to make this short because I'm pretty old at this point. I started working when I started working in IT. My first job was in a BBS. Remember those BBS companies?
I don't actually. Elaborate that for me. Yeah.
So it was pre-internet, so
Mm,
it's that old. So yeah, the company transitioned to be like an ISP, and I worked there as a support guy. But that was my university years. So after that, I just started getting contact with Unix and like HTML. It was the first thing, and then CGI driven applications. It was like really old stuff. Um, I always be involved with open source, so my whole life was Linux, and I liked that kind of environment. And it was
hmm.
very, open source. You have to figure out the things by yourself. You have to interact with the community. You need to contribute. Um, that gave me the opportunity to work in like to keep switching between development and infrastructure, and I say that I'm very fortunate because I have this kind of exposure to both technologies in both worlds. I was able to understand that thing that a developer had to go through, and that thing that a sysadmin at the time that like
Right.
had to do this. So I think, in a way, today we call this full stack developers. For
Right.
me, it was just like I was a developer and I had to know everything.
Right.
But yeah, and so it was natural for me. The transition to be a cloud architect was, um, I when I joined Qlik, I was hired as a developer, and then I transitioned to be an SRE, part of the SRE team that the company was establishing, and then my transition to being a cloud architect. So I'm very fortunate because my background gave me exposure to all those technologies, those kinds of problems, and feeling on my skin what it is to
Right.
be a developer and what the product should be how the product should be functioning. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I think in many ways, what you're saying is like the reality of what has happened in like the last 10, 15 years. Like we were all people who would have static boxes, instances, servers. And from there, we transitioned to running everything. Like, so we went to VMs, and then from VMs, we went to containers, right?
Yeah.
Similarly, we went from running infrastructure in our DCs to like a cloud. And then I think interestingly, same thing has happened with data and databases too, where we used to have like, I would say, like traditional databases, and then by around 2010 we had like NoSQL databases, and now we're talking about distributed databases and vector databases and graph databases. So I think there has been this journey that naturally has happened in tech, and it's very interesting. One of the questions I wanted to ask you was like, so obviously you mentioned your open source background, and um, were you like somebody who was involved in open source communities, or has been used to using open source products over the last 10, 15 years?
I truly was like in the ISP that I work with. Like like first, I'm from Brazil. I grew up in Brazil, so things are not as accessible as they are here in
Right.
Canada or in the US, right? So we had to be creative.
Mm,
Open source was the way that we found to make this happen. So it was perfect for a country that was like under development and you need to have access to stuff. And Brazilian people are super creative.
right.
So we managed to make this happen. I had the opportunity. I'm very great to have worked for a Linux distribution at the time, the company called Connectiva. So it was initially based on Red Hat, and
Yeah.
then it became something else. The company doesn't exist anymore, but during that time, I had a chance to work with really good developers. Like some
Mm,
of them are still working for Canonical or Red Hat today, and amazing people. I learned a lot. We had to be involved with the community. I contributed to several projects. I contributed to Apache and VTP server,
nice.
some GIS applications. I love GIS applications for some time. And whenever I can, I'm always in GitHub trying to find something different. So it's like a virus.
That's
It's
awesome.
in.
Yeah, I think I love that too, because I grew up in India, and then what most of my experience was just what I got educated in college, and then what I got in the industry. If I got introduced to open source around 2015, 14, 15, and with the Kubernetes stuff, and then I was using databases like Cassandra, which is all part of the Apache ecosystem, and that was my in. And I started to realize like how amazing these people are who are contributing and making these amazing products that can scale, that literally, if you look at it, have been so significant in the usual everyday experience of users using these applications. So for me, open source was like that. It was fantastic. And I feel like it's important for open source to continue to be critical and stay in the mix of all the other development that is still happening in the proprietary world. So it's pretty cool. But at the same time, certain companies at some point have to transition away from open source product, because what is happening also in the cloud space is like somebody will just copy your code and like just start making money and start affecting the real people who contributed to that. So have you personally thought about this, and what's your perspective? Yeah.
we I have to face this kind of situation sometimes because what everything that makes open source good also make it like complicated sometimes. Like
Right.
you have to be able to keep contributing and having good access because well you need to you as a company you need to think about like questions like audit, compliance, and security, and because of that you need to invest on those on this kind of requirements that
Right.
to maintain things, right? And it's a delicate balance. You need to be able to rely on open source products that can both provide you this level of security or this level of assurance for your business.
Right.
But at the same time, the open source community is super creative. You see things that are always like popping up earlier than you see in some companies. So it's a delicate balance. It's hard for me to have to choose between open source and a proprietary solution, but yeah, sometimes you have to make those decisions, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. So, were you like, as you transitioned into the cloud role, like, were you always convinced when cloud was picking up, like, with that cloud is the future, and or you were one of those people like, yeah, this is another one of those trends that might like come and like die? Like, what were your thoughts at the time?
It took me, I think, 5 or 6 years until I actually started trusting the cloud. It was like, I think this stuff is gonna die or something like that.
Right,
But yeah, like many vendors, many cloud vendors growing up and actually coming with solutions that were starting to get widely used. Um, it was a moment that opened my eyes to like, okay, I think it's time to start pay attention to some of those things.
yeah,
But never crossed my mind that I actually wanted to be a cloud architect. Like my focus was much more on technology and like
right.
yeah.
Yeah, that's good. So, now that you're talking about the cloud, one of the thoughts I had was like you've worked with site reliability. If it's not a term or a concept we would talk about, say 7 or 8 years ago, even like I would say 6 years ago or 5 years ago, but now today site reliability and being a site reliability engineer is like one of the key functions in a company, right? And you've worked extensively on that. So for someone who's new, can you explain site reliability and what that means, and what really does an SRE do for the young people who are listening?
Yeah, yeah, that's a good one. I this crosses my day every day. I define an SRE as the pinnacle of software development, and no false modesty here. Like I think an SRE is the kind of person that has a really good experience with development. He has a really good experience with security and understands well infrastructure in general.
Mm,
But more than that, is a person that can combine those skills and uh, have the customer first, the product first, because especially if you have like a commercial solution. Um, your product is not going to be good if you don't think about how it's being used. And the
mm,
most important part about that is the user experience, right? So if you're building a solution that only you're going to use, or that you don't care about like how the customer is using that, uh, chances are your solution is not going to have a long live, right? So
right.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think when you were saying, I was just thinking like gone are the days when you would build something and it would be down for say a couple of hours, and people would be like, ah, we know it's down. Now, if something goes down, you hear about it everywhere. It's like I think the customer or the user expectations to the technology has changed. You always want stuff to be always up, and I think site reliability or having that function really helps towards somebody who understands all these things, but basically ensures as an outcome that everything is running all the time, right? And I think it took the companies a while to accept that, because they were always like, well, but because the customers expect things to be up now, it's like a function that's necessary. So while you've worked, what are some misconceptions you feel enterprises have around implementing site reliability effectively?
Good question. I think the first thing that companies have to understand is that SRE is not ops. So
Mm,
it's a different, because there's this assumption like, oh, we have an SRE team, and when you're going to look at, they're just like operators or cloud operators, like people that leave our infrastructure all the time. Uh, this is probably the biggest problem, because if you have an SRE team, or if you're investing to have an SRE team, the biggest asset that you have to cultivate is to make sure that your SREs work with your development team, because they have the know-how and they have conditions to keep improving the quality of your services. So
right,
if you have an SRE team that lives in a siloed environment, or just like put yourself in that big castle in the hill, on the hill,
right,
you're not actually using the benefits of having SRE. You want them to participate, to make the product better, to contributing, and more important, like the bread and butter of an SRE is actually thinking about service levels, objectives. Like you always trying to fight against that extra nine. You want to make that better, right? Because you want
right,
to make this more reliable, more secure. So you have to keep thinking about automating things, reducing the toil that you have, and like all about like, let's be less manual, let's thinking about objectives, thinking about results, and using our time to do what we want, what is really fun. Nobody wants to spend like 8 hours a few days just fixing bugs, right? You want
right.
things better.
100%. Yeah. This is a joke. I do not know if you know about this, but I bring it up in a lot of conversations, especially people with like who work on infrastructure and like operators or SREs. What is the favorite song of a site reliability engineer?
A favorite song?
Yeah.
We didn't start the fire.
I think that's a good one too. But I feel like another one that you can use is a smooth operator,
Smooth
where like
operator. It's a
it's
good
like the CTO or CEO comes like, "Hey, what do you do?" And he's like, "Just listen to the song, smooth operator."
smooth operator.
But it's awesome, yeah. So like I think high availability, I mean, as you were mentioning, is like critical, right? Like so, while you've built or worked with enterprises, what are some of the biggest mistakes you feel like they are that you have seen them do repeatedly around like leveraging the cloud or architecting for high availability, from your experience?
I think the biggest one is lift and shifting.
Hmm.
So when you just took like you take something for granted because it was like it always worked, but you don't stop to say like, yeah, but look, it's a different environment, so you better like consider like the changes and the implications of that. Like eventually, what you end up seeing is like you end with the mounting of tech debt, or you have
Right.
situation that you before what you have used to be able to cover 90% of your use case, and then when you move it's going to be 30%, but it's still like, but it's still covering those 30%, and you don't accept that you have to move away from that, and you have to make sacrifices to make that better. And the other one is over engineering.
Hmm.
Like sometimes it's like I was making this joke with a friend of mine yesterday. We were looking at updating something, and he had to apply a configuration file that was basically like uh, key value equal value, key
Hmm.
value equal value 1.9, but before he had a comma between the two. So he was like, okay, I have to write a regex to change that. And I'm like, dude, you have to change two lines. Really need to write a regex for this? It's like,
Right, right.
yeah.
That's funny. It's, I think I have seen all similar patterns and similar challenges, right? Like as you were saying, but one of the things that I've come to realize is that at the end of the day, the most crucial thing is to design, systems uh, that can scale and are always, available. But as to you say, not to over engineer it, and also to make sure if you're even if you're lifting, shifting, yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, move certain things that are important, but at the same time, understand that you're playing on a different pitch. It's like practice ground versus different environment. So you have to learn to play in that environment. So from your perspective, how can they do this better? Like, do you recommend, enterprises that you speak to, or like the companies or the people you work with in your company, do you tell them like a method? Is there like some Masaru best practices to make sure that you don't make these mistakes?
Um, Not necessarily. I think each company has to find their way to work. I think
Right.
the DNA of the company comes a lot from the leadership. So
Mm.
they're the one that actually going to be able to say like how the company works. So it's important that the leadership between the leadership they have a good relationship, and they have like a really aligned mindset, because this is going to have to dictate how all your organization is gonna work.
True.
uh, like for example, there are some companies that they begin as startups, they grow as a startup, but they never change the mindset.
Right.
And then sometimes this can be good, this can be bad. I'm not saying that there's a perfect recipe for everything, but it's important that as you grow, you keep having time to reevaluate what you're doing. Same thing for methodologies. Like you have to look what's going to work better for you. Like
Right.
you, I'm not surprised that there are companies that still use waterfall. Waterfall
Mm.
works for them, and it's functional. Like the same way that some companies use agile, and it's a total disaster. So
Right.
it's not it's not the methodology that's going to make everything work. It's more important that people are on board, that you have the support for leadership, and you actually have a clear understanding of goals and what you want to do.
Absolutely. I think it's well said, Masaru, because, many times we go for like do this, do that, but we forget that the fundamental problem is in the way things are structured and envisioned within a company. I'm glad you brought that perspective out. So really cool. When we were,
And
yeah,
by the way, I just want
yeah,
to say that I'm very fortunate with my leadership,
okay,
because I keep learning a lot with them. Like I said, like I learned in 5 years what I didn't learn in 20. So it's
mm.
it's it's good, and I give a lot to my peers and to my leaders, because like yeah, it's important that you find someone that can coach you properly,
Oh
so
yeah.
kids can identify itself.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's amazing that you brought that perspective up because, I get to work with multiple customers, right? Like we work in the revenue organization. So some of my vision for this comes from I talk to a customer and the customer is like, hey, I want to move this DB2, that's running to like Cockroach DB, or I want to get out of on-prem systems to, on the cloud, say AWS or GCP or Azure. And then many times they do not understand the what it takes, right? And so I'm very glad that you brought the perspective around leadership and why it's important to have a culture where you understand what are the key components and share all this information together. And that sets the migration story, that sets the lift and shift and what not to do to make sure things go bad, so
Yeah, things get much easier when you're able to see when you have your goals defined, right? At least like having that vision, because it doesn't need to be 100% clear. I'm a believer that not every idea comes clear as crystal, so you
right,
have like a first glimpse, but as long as you can have like a certainty of what you're going to do, what are your goals, and how we're going to get there, like you can build your path as you move, like
right.
yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. When I was talking to you, and you have some really good experience with FinOps as well. Tell us a little bit about your experience with FinOps and some cool things that you've done in the space.
Yeah, so we started investing in FinOps like 3 or 4 years ago. It was a self-guided learning path. So we had to understand first like how where we were spending money, like how we were spending this, and with time we start creating like our own tools and our own methods to track and monitor everything. We're currently following the FinOps Foundation. So the FinOps Foundation is pretty good. Like they're being able to create this framework and like assist people that want to learn more, invest more on FinOps. For me, my CTO said like the best tool for an architect is in Excel. Um, so yeah, no, I that's actually a very important lesson for everyone. Like just because the cloud is so easy, so accessible, a lot of people forget that it still costs. And
Right,
sometimes not sometimes, you always have to keep reevaluating how you're spending stuff. There's this the kindergarten syndrome where
mm,
you just spin up like a resource and you forget. You say
right,
like, instead of like, oh, I finished playing with my toys, I'm going to put it back in the box. So uh,
absolutely,
that's a very key component for the cloud, because like, yeah, the same way that it can be super accessible, it can become your demise. So if you don't pay attention and you don't have a clear objective of what where you're spending, how you're going to spend that, and then how you can control, and you can one day you can wake up and look at your credit card bill and say like, oh my god, I have to sell the
yes.
house. Yeah.
No, I know the feeling. I have done stuff in the past where I used to forget. Oh, I have some in situ instances running somewhere, and that's when I fell in love with Terraform.
Mhm.
Apply and Terraform destroy. I think have a moment of like joy when I click Terraform destroy, because there have been so many times that I have got like, this was, I think, early days of me trying to use the cloud, and I had this AWS cloud credits, and I had this instance where I created like an instance, and I created the VPC and I got everything going, and then I deleted some of the stuff, and I forgot that I had to delete the NAT gateway and all these other things, the load balancer that I created. I forgot about all of that, and then and later I was saying like, why is this my money's going away? Like I had a credit, and I'm like, what's happening? So it's great that you're bringing that up. So like for people listening, and even for me, I'm not a big I don't do FinOps or don't get into that space. Expand the FinOps foundation stuff. Like, what are the bare minimum basic things that we should be thinking about?
Right. So I think the biggest benefit you're going to see from following like a framework, a FinOps framework, is you're not going to be caught by surprise, and you're going to have like full control of how much you actually costing to build things. Um, uh, Not going too much into them. I'm not going to spoil people. I think I want people to go and figure it out by themselves. But the FinOps framework, it provides you like this methodology, so you can actually you can get the whole company involved in this. Like it's important to understand that cost control is not FinOps. FinOps is actually the culture of maintaining things under financial control, and it's only effective if you have the whole company embracing that. So everybody had to understand like, okay, I'm actually spending this, I know how much it costs, like good, because this gives you perspective of what you're building. It like the developers don't like. I don't think anybody likes the idea to think about like, oh, how much I'm spending now. It's a reality. You don't want to keep thinking about like, oh, am I going to have money at the end of the month? But at the same time, if you know like how much it's costing, you start giving a different value to the work that you're doing, because you know like, okay, I'm actually being able to produce something that it's actually really affordable, and I can scale. The cost is going to scale, and just have to make a revenue that's going to pay for that. So your own business is able to grow at an equivalent pace.
Right. Yeah. And I think, one of the things I liked about this is of what you just said. I think in many ways, what you're saying is FinOps is like a culture that has to be embraced and has to be applied. And everybody should know that this is an important thing that we do. Right.
The same way that SRE also should be a culture. Like
Right.
you don't need to have a team at an SRE. Many companies that have SRE teams. Google, when they originally came up with the SRE term, they have an SRE team.
Right.
But to me, I like to extend this idea and say like, hey, the values that an SRE has doesn't have to be limited to that team. Like the more people that actually understand that live those values, it's going to be beneficial for the whole company. So
Right.
I think like if you have a company that and maybe this is the prophetic part, and you say like, if you want to have like a good company, invest on those two principles. Invest on
Right.
the SRE principles and the FinOps principle. They are reality. Like you want to have your product reliable, you want to have like cost effective. So there are frameworks for that. There are tons of lessons around that. So why not look at that?
Absolutely. I mean, that's brilliant. Well said. Um, how do you think, like, this is, if I have this podcast and I don't say the word AI, then somebody is going to be like, this is probably a podcast from the 20s. So it's part of trend hacking, but part of also the reality of what we live in. How do you think AI is going to change how a site reliability engineer kind of operates, and like, and the whole idea of, because there's this whole idea of agentic AIs and MCP servers. How do you feel like AI is going to affect SRE
Yeah,
smooth operators?
I think what I watched someone talking about that yesterday in a podcast. Sorry, it was not yours. It was someone else.
Totally fine.
They were talking about like what's going to happen next. Like right now we're in the generative AI generation, so
Right.
we're able to consume a lot of information and process this information to give like an actual context. I think the future, like we're not too far from that, but I think we're going to go for predictive reliability management, in the sense that we're going to be able to start with the information that you have available. You're going to be able to start doing predictions or expectations what's going to happen next.
Right.
For example, that's going to help you for things like capacity planning, instant triaging, or even like scalability for the future.
Mm,
So I think we're not too far from that. And spoiler alert, I'm not going to talk too much about where I am, but I will keep my eyes on what Qlik is producing, because you're
very
going to
cool.
like it.
I mean, I would be surprised if Qlik wasn't, but anyways, that's awesome. All right. So now for everyone listening in, we enter a very interesting segment. We call it the rapid fire segment. Okay. So Masaru, you have to answer either in one word or in a short sentence. Okay, or phrase. And then once you complete it, we can probably go back to some of this and elaborate on it. But because you are a third degree black belt in karate, you have to answer the first question: karate or cloud computing, which requires more discipline?
Cloud computing.
Okay, cool. We'll come back to this. Okay. All right. Next question: what's the most underrated cloud technology or tool right now, according to you?
Oh man, one word.
One word or a phrase or a sentence? We'll give you a few sentences.
SLOs.
All right. Okay, cool. We'll take that. All right. Next one. Predict one surprising way AI might transform your role, what you're doing right now, in 3 years. Kind of hinted on this a little bit, but yeah.
Yeah, well, I think what I said, like I think predictable liability management.
Right. Agreed. Okay. If AI wrote a movie script about your life, what kind of movie it would be?
Terminator 4, maybe.
Tell me more. Amazing, amazing. So let's go back to that one question, right? Like karate or cloud computing, which one requires more discipline? Elaborate why it requires to have a little bit more discipline around cloud technology.
Yes, I think it's different from karate.
Yeah.
The karate actually, I also recommend anyone to do some martial arts. I can talk about karate because this helps me in my work. You have to be able to have when you're training karate. There's a lot of that you do by yourself.
Right.
Unfortunately, you don't have a partner most of the time, which is my preferred way of training. But you're alone. So, and when you're alone, you have to learn to live with yourself. Like most people don't realize that because we're always surrounded by information and by a lot of people. But living with yourself can be one of the most challenging parts of your life
Mm,
because you realize like all your weakness, all your problems, or everything that you have to deal with. So you have to have this constant battle because you're training, you're putting yourself to struggle, and you cannot give up. You force yourself to remain there. Cloud computing, it's a always changing environment. Like the technology is the challenging part, but I think the most important part of everything that we build is the human connections. So if we don't do like if we don't have like good relationship, if we are not able to nurture uh, um, the relationships that you have with your vendors, with your peers, with your reports, chances are you're not going to be very successful for too long. You're not going to be someone that can last for a long time in the place that you are. And you have to be able to combine both. So we work in the technology area. So you have people that work with technology. So technology changes all the time. People also
nice.
change. You swing a mood. You have to be able to accept that you I take for myself, you have to accept that you are not better than anyone, but
Mm,
you are there. Sometimes you know something that in an area that someone doesn't. You have to be humble enough to understand like, okay, I have to do that, so please accept me. But you also have to have those moments to say like, look, I know what I'm talking about.
mm,
So I'm accepting where I am, accepting my weakness, accepting everything that we have to do. Let's disagree and commit. And you cannot let yourself succumb to that because
right.
it's easy for uh, and that's a mistake that I see a lot of people doing. It doesn't mean that you are an architect or whatever position that you are, that you should be abusing what you
Mm,
have. If anything, you should put yourself lower than than anyone you're talking to, because you have to understand that you are there to learn, you are there to improve things. So just like you do with reliability, right? You always reevaluating your conditions. You're always saying like how can make this better. So
yeah.
cloud computing is definitely harder.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, you can write an entire book on that, because it's like philosophy and your experience as a karate expert, everything coming together around technology. So that's brilliant. So I think we've summarized that the episode will be called "Code, Cloud, and Karate." But thank you so much. So towards the end, like I always feel like it's always good to give somebody like a key takeaway, which you already kind of hinted on. But if there is any young person who is trying to get into site reliability or choose a career in cloud, what are your go-to sources or references that you tell them to go and kind of study, so that they can get into this path?
Don't be afraid to expose yourself to things. Like, don't be afraid to make mistakes, and don't be afraid to seek for help. Uh, Try to look for like people that you see going to be able to help you, and remain humble. Because if anything in this life, you're going to be much more successful if you accept that there's always something to learn, and
Mm,
that's the karate speaking, right? So
yeah,
you're never going to be you're never going to be better than anyone.
right.
You're always going to be better than you were the day before.
Absolutely. Like 1% improvement every day,
Yep.
or 1% decline every day is essentially the same idea. But thank you. I mean, Masaru, that's really awesome. Like I really enjoyed talking to you. Hope you had a great time coming on. For everyone listening in, go follow Masaru Hoshi. He's on LinkedIn. Are you also active on Twitter by any chance? By any other
Uh,
platforms people can follow you on?
I was in Twitter and I'm moving to Blue Sky, but yeah,
Let's
you find me on LinkedIn.
Okay, cool. So Masaru's on LinkedIn. Follow Qlik and some of the cool stuff that the company is doing. And Masaru, once again, thank you so much for coming on the pod. It was great talking to you. I really enjoyed the natural way in which we could get into philosophy, karate, and technology. So I
Well,
appreciate it. Thank you.
thank you, David. It was a really good opportunity. I hope you have so much fun as I had.
Yeah, it was great. You were a smooth operator.
I didn't start the fire.
Thank you. Brilliant. All right, everybody. See you in the next episode. Catch you later. Bye.